What do you do with love that leaves bruises, that leaves marks?
What do we do with love that bruises? The question has been weighing on my consciousness all week. A topic that many Black men are suffering with in silence when it comes to our childhoods and us engaging in fatherhood. What does it mean to be a good father? And more specifically, what does it mean to be a good Black father? You see, many of us as Black fathers are simultaneously healing and hunting. We're healing from a spectrum of emotions that we've collected in our lifetime. Some of us are healing from having no fathers at all. Others are healing from having fathers who tried their best but fell short in ways that have left us both grateful and confused. We're thankful for their presence, but we're wondering, what do we do with the complex legacies they left behind? The abuse, the adultery, in search of being a great provider, their absence. And even as they were great providers, many were better fathers to us than partners to our mothers. So they showed us that they loved us, but failed in showing us how to love women. What do we do when we realize that they saw their primary mission as preparing us to survive in a white supremacist world? They saw their protection as something that came through discipline and sternness that often bordered on abuse. Consider Will Smith's powerful reflection about his father. His father was affectionately known as Daddy-O. Will Smith says, quote, "Daddy-O was brilliant. Like many sons, I worshiped my father, but he also terrified me. He was one of the greatest blessings of my life and also one of the greatest sources of pain." End quote. This complex dynamic of love mixed with fear, of worship tangled with terror, echoes through generations of Black fathers and sons. And what happens when the elders that we are looking to for guidance are still battling their own fatherhood wounds? Consider Eddie Glaude's profound reflection on how generations before us carry their own pain, their own unhealed wounds from their fathers, who carried wounds from their fathers before them. A chain of hurt stretching back through time, each generation trying to do better while wrestling with the scars of the past.
I want to ask you another aspect of the book, which is the book is also in many ways about fathers.
Yeah.
And in the sense of even kind of intellectual fathers for you. This is you talking to your mentors and to other scholars, but also in the most literal sense. You talk about your own dad. And could you just tell us a little bit about your relationship with your father?
It's a difficult question, and every time I've been doing this since it came out, and every time it's asked, I just pause, because my dad is everything to me, but he scared the shit out of me. He deposited a kind of fear in me that led me to conclude that I was a coward. Jimmy used to say, Baldwin used to say that, he was afraid from the moment he took his first breath, right? I don't remember in my childhood when I wasn't afraid. He could, I tell the story in the book. I begin the heroism chapter with this horrific moment. I'm playing with my neighbor. She was so cute. And we were playing hopscotch. And, she'd throw a rock and right? And my task was to mess up every time. I was going to step on every line. I was going to fall out because I wanted her to keep showing me.
Yeah.
So I'm showing I'm in the 5th grade, but I'm showing my skill set real early, right? And as we're playing, And she kept showing me. I hear my dad scream for me to bring my ass home. And I walk into the foyer of the house, and my uncle's sitting on the couch, and he's looking like something's about to go down. And my dad asks me, "What are you, a fag or something?" And I'm looking at him, and he's got that look, and I start to well up. And, it was this real hurtful moment. And he did that a couple of times, right? Something like that. But he's the most responsible man I know. I mean, they got married at 21. My mom was 20. They had 4 kids. I didn't find out that my brother and sister weren't his until I was in high school, because there was no distinction in the crib. None.
No, but just so you know, that's not in the book. So
No.
You don't have to tell. You don't have to tell all of it.
I'm trying to give a sense of who my dad is, And so he used to say to all of us, "If you survive me, then nothing in the world can shake you."
And he meant it with love, that he was training you.
And so part of what I'm doing in that moment is, what do you do with love that leaves bruises, that leaves marks?
These men, our fathers, our uncles and grandfathers, Eddie Glaude's father, Eddie Glaude even now himself, are still working through their journey of healing, even as they try to guide us. Even as they try to show us a better way, they too are still searching for answers. You can see in Eddie Glaude's contemplation in that video that he was searching for answers, searching for a way to explain not only what he experienced as a child, but to explain what he is going through in his journey, trying to put words to it as a man, and what he had to keep the same and change as a father. This brings us to a crucial question. Do Black men need the church to facilitate spaces for both recovery from and discovery of life-giving fatherhood? Has the duty of prior generations to prepare and protect us as their sons and daughters left us with a form of love and fatherhood that is full of firmness but void of nurturing? Today, for our weekly wrap-up, I want to examine Ephesians 6:4, and I want to talk about evolving the Black family through facilitating the space to grow as fathers. Ephesians 6:4 says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord." This simple verse challenges us to examine the practices of our fatherhood, practices that were taught to us, but maybe we're not in line with this text. We must ask ourselves questions like, how long do we make our children sit at the table until their homework is perfect? How much rigor do we instill in them because we know they'll need it to fight against racism? Do we push them to tears, teaching them that freedom comes from outworking others and being twice as good? The scriptures gives us clear direction to answer these questions. No, we do not do those things if they provoke our children. We don't provoke them. Yes, we understand that they'll face anger and tears and hardship, but we dive in that anger, those tears, and that hardship with them rather than being the ones that provoke them to these emotions. This text has a crucial term: bring them up. And if we're not careful, we can think that this term, bring them up, is simply just a space filler for the text, but it's not. It's more than that. In Greek, it's the word ektrepho. It's the very heart of God's instructions for fathers. Will Smith in his book reveals a childhood that lacks ektrepho when he says this about his father, quote, "In Daddy-O's mind, everything was life or death. He was preparing his children to thrive in a harsh world, a world that he saw as chaotic and brutal. The instilling of fear was and still is a cultural parenting tactic in the Black community. Fear is embraced as a survival necessity. It is a widely held belief that to protect Black children, They must fear parental authority. The instilling of fear is viewed as an offering of love. End quote. This is why ektrepho, this building them up, is so crucial. This is why nurturing must replace fear, why our children should emerge from a foundation of nurturing and feeding. This foundation of nurturing and feeding becomes the primary resource, the essential tool we use to raise great children. This word guides us to provide on every level. It guides us to provide physically, emotionally, and spiritually to ensure their complete development. Ektrepho is not just about what we do, but it is also about how we do it. The tragic reality in our community is that we've often exchanged true ektrepho for beating our children down in what we call love. We've convinced ourselves that we must beat them with love so the world can't beat them with hate. We often struggle with this concept of nurturing because we've never experienced it ourselves to the right degree. We fear that this concept of nurturing might make our sons too soft or our daughters too vulnerable.
When they used to tell me Kyle was defiant, what I recognized a long time ago is that defiance is what gets young black men killed. Because the most young black men who are in prison have learning disabilities. They are dyslexic in some way, audio or idio. They can't hear or they can't understand their process. 85% of men in prison. So to somebody of a different culture, somebody culturally different, that may seem mischievous or he dances to his own beat. Right. When it's our culture, somebody gets killed. And I knew right away that I would have to prepare him for a world that wasn't like the world she wanted for him. Like I was a coddler, and I was like, he's like, get in the game. I can't let him do this because it will cripple him. It'll be. You could literally get your son killed by not getting him ready for a world that won't see him that way. So I think for a lot of his existence, a lot of his growing up. Okay.
For a lot of his growing up,
I failed him. I'm not getting him ready. And I was scared to death that I would, if you fail your son, he dies. He could die. Not my daughters, I knew they'd be all right. But I didn't know how to make him ready for this world and see it clear so he could see what's coming. Like everybody tells you, put your hands on the wheel or stay away from this or don't do this. Black boys don't get that kind of, and you know it. So for me, it wasn't about vanity. It was about how do I make this boy ready for a world that, like, if something happens to me tomorrow, I know my son is going to be all right.
Here's my call to action for you. Black fathers, we must trust the Lord more than we distrust the world. Our children need this nurturing and nourishment as they navigate life between heaven and earth. Here are a few practical steps for our churches, Black churches, which are such a foundational component of the Black community. Here are a few steps for Black pastors that I know you love your people, but here is a step where you can take your love a bit further. Here are some concrete actions for facilitating spaces to grow in fatherhood. The first thing that you need to do is survey your men. Start with 3 essential questions. Question number 1, are you in a season of enjoyment and growth in your marriage and fatherhood? Now, some of them may be fathers and not married, and some of them may be married and not fathers. And some of them will be both. You want to ask this question in both areas because you want your men to come together, whether they are married and fathers, married and not fathers, or fathers and not married. You want them to share this space together. Question number 2. What are your greatest encouragements in marriage and fatherhood? And finally, question number 3, what are your hardest challenges in this current season of marriage and fatherhood? And are there any challenges from prior seasons that you have not recovered from, healed from, or found solutions to in marriage and fatherhood? Now, after you survey your people, aim for 100% participation on this survey. After you survey them, take these survey results and center your men's ministry around them. Begin to create an environment that is not just for learning, but that is for genuine conversation and connection, that puts your men in genuine relationship with one another, trying to figure out not only other parts of life, but what does it take for me to be a solid, whole, healthy father and husband. This space should be a space that is not facilitated, but a space that is shepherded. You are facilitating the environment, but you are shepherding in the space. This can be done by your marriage and family counselor, or your marriage and family pastor. Or maybe you need to connect with a biblical therapist that can begin to work with your men on this. But this person must be someone who can draw out what is trapped inside these men, sit with them in their struggles, then come together strategically with them to grow them, to help them learn from their experiences, and help them find freedom, hope, excitement, and healing, not only from their childhoods, but in their husbandry and their fatherhood. The second idea is to create community through play. Organize quarterly church-wide play dates for fathers and their children. They can meet at rock climbing gyms or local parks, places where families come together. Now, this isn't a time for our fathers to stand back and observe and just lay in the cut, but this is a time for them to actively engage and play with their children, to bond with other fathers, to show their children different sides of fatherhood, to let their children see them not just working and teaching, but playing and laughing in community. And here's a side note: keep the competitive edge down, dads. You know, when we get into space, we get competitive. This is not about us winning. This is about us allowing our children to see us in places, spaces, demeanors, and attitudes of enjoying play. Third option: implement tailored testimonies within your fatherhood community of the church and within the wider church itself. How do you do that? Work with your video ministry to record 3 or 4 messages a year, maybe 1 a quarter, from fathers to their children. Guide these fathers to share their hearts. Guide them to talk about what they love about their children, the joys and challenges of parenting them, necessary apologies for mistakes made in parenting their children, their hopes and prayers for their children's future. Then share these messages strategically. Share some during Sunday service, others during special family dinners or group gatherings in your church community. Actually have some of the families come together at their own dinners, 4 or 5 families together. And they can either share these messages after dinner, during dessert, on video, or they can go around a table and voice them to their children there. Make sure that these messages are not off the head or off the whim. Tell fathers to take some time and pray through and write and work through what they want to say to their children. Remind them that they are creating a memory in this space that their children will hold on to forever. Now, these aren't just suggestions. They're pathways to healing, ways to build stronger families and create spaces where fathers can grow together. So all my men out there, whether we're recovering from our father's attempts or discovering how to become our best, or carrying on the generations of the good fathers that we had in our lives that we think got it right, we must remember that this work is mandatory. We must look forward to our children loving us for it. But most importantly, we must know that if we do our job in this area, church, if you do your job in facilitating a space to grow for fatherhood in your church, that the children that come up in your ministry won't carry the same wounds that their fathers and their grandfathers have had to carry. Be blessed. I hope this was helpful.